Wild day was had in a Manhattan courthouse. It has just wrapped up, testifying under oath in the $250 million civil fraud trial. Ex-President Donald Trump gave quite a performance, if you will, from the bench, ranting angrily about the judge, the New York Attorney General, who you just saw there, as well as prosecutors. Trump was extremely combative, even for Trump. At one point, Judge Engoron told Trump's lawyers, quote, "I beseech you to control him," and said that if Trump continued to sidestep questions, quote, "I will take every negative inference that I can." At another point, the judge warned, quote, "This is not a political rally." When Trump did deign to answer questions about the valuations of his company's assets, he argued that his properties were severely undervalued on financial statements. And he described his involvement in those statements, seemingly undercutting his very own legal defense. Joining us here at the table, someone who we turn to all the time for her reporting on the civil trial and Trump's business dealings over the years, New York Times investigative reporter Sue Craig, who is outside the courthouse today. Andrew Weissman is still with us as well, inside. So we talked about this a little bit in the last hour, and I want to start with the legal substance of what he offered. It was Andrew's assessment that he damaged himself on a couple of fronts, and I want to deal with the theatrics and the drama second, but take me through. I know you always have a notebook. And I'm careful never to make sure we never turn a camera on them. But just tell me your reporting on the legal substance and the substance of his testimony first.
Well, I first want to say, after things like this, as a newspaper reporter, I usually call a lawyer to see what they think, and then I look really smart in the paper. So I'm glad you're here. Okay, so you and I should confer, and then we'll have this conversation.
Totally.
But you know, I thought it was interesting. And I want to just take the volume down a bit and just talk about some of his defenses this morning. And they didn't all happen this morning, but a lot of them were kind of jam-packed into the first part. And the first one is that the banks don't rely on these statements. And he just went on about that. They said, you know, he said they look at the deal, they look at the location. So they do their own due diligence and they come to a conclusion. And then he went on about how the financial statements themselves have all these disclaimers that make them worthless. And, you know, he said in one of the, so he says, though, I have all this language that says don't rely on them, and these are just kind of our best guess or whatever they say. So then he went to that. But I think the one, if I could zero in on, that he fell back the most on was the idea, and I don't think it's unpersuasive to a larger audience, that these loans are performing. That all of them, he went on sometimes at great length about how the Chicago loan is one example. It actually was just recently paid back. But the banks have made tens of millions of dollars on these loans. So there's no victims here. And that was the one I felt he fell back on. And then the other thing that he said over and over and over, this will come as no surprise to anybody, that the financial statements are not only amazing, they actually undervalue his assets. So
I call that the perfect call defense.
Right. And I think the one that's easily digestible to a lot of people is the triplex at Trump Tower. So there's been a lot of discussion about how many square feet are in that. Is it? I think it's roughly 10,000. He's been saying it's 30,000 square feet, and that's been in the documents. And his excuse for that, I thought he might just fall on his sword and say that was a typo or we got that wrong or something. But no, he said that in valuing it, it included things that maybe shouldn't have been included, like the elevator shaft. I think he might have mentioned the common space.
How big is the elevator?
Right. So now we've got the biggest elevators.
Wow.
Yeah. It's 2 floors.
The shaft, we measured it on the edges.
So that and then the other part that was just interesting, he sort of became a bit of a travel agent at times. Every time he'd talk about a property, he'd talk about Scotland and how the views are great. It's got castles on it.
He used to talk about the thread count and stuff. He used to talk about the sheets and the views.
He didn't mention, by the way, that most of his properties lose money year in and year out, and that he's plowed millions of dollars just to keep them going. It doesn't mean they don't have value if they're sold, but they are pretty much without exception. There's a few that make money. Most of them lose money. That didn't come up in his presentation today.
It was pointed out that he has clearly personalized the civil finding of fraud. And he said to Judge Engoron, "You accuse me of fraud." Nobody accused him of anything. Evidence was presented. The Attorney General said today the numbers don't lie. And based on the preponderance of evidence, he was found liable for fraud. Right. He seems to have sort of twisted that and was presenting that as an attack against Judge Engoron today.
Right. And I want to speak to that because I think it was effective, because instead of talking about what I was just talking about, everybody's talking about his performance in court today. This was a win for him because his audience isn't the judge. His audience is the voters and the people who feel he's wronged. He played the victim card perfectly today.
If they even see it, right?
Right, but they'll hear something about it. He was fundraising. I got an email while I was in court, a fundraising email. We'll get some more tonight. He was very loud, and at one point he was screaming at the judge, and he said, "You know nothing about me or my properties." Like, he was just screaming at him, and the judge started out trying to really just rein him in. He was sort of objecting, like you would imagine the lawyer for the Attorney General, what he was saying. Answer the question. You're going on. He just kept stopping him. I have a whole list here of all the things he said. You can attack me. You can do what you want, but just answer the question. That was a yes or no question. In addition to the answers being non-responsive, they are repetitive. No, I don't want to hear everything the witness has to say. And that was, I think, badly phrased by the judge. He was saying he's giving political speeches, and at one point he told him to stop giving political speeches. I mean, this was all before 11 o'clock. I just gave up kind of trying to keep track. But then in the afternoon, the judge kind of took, I thought, his foot off the gas on this a bit, and a couple times he looked at the lawyer for the Attorney General and said, "I can interrupt if you want. I mean, this is your witness. If you want to let him go on." He's not answering. He's answering, but it's repetitive. He's giving a speech, but he really did sort of dial it back even in the late morning, afternoon. But Trump was he was like a caged animal at points. I mean, it was really
without the cage.
He was really angry. At one point, he brought something that was a document related to the financials, and he wanted to read it in court, and the judge said no. It was
to do himself harm in that. While his son said, "Well, I relied on experts. I don't know anything about accounting. I just went to business. I don't know what that acronym." He seemed to say, "Yeah, no, I did it. It was me, and it was great."
Well, he also said he relied on accountants, and he just sort of added more. I did. I knew about a lot of it, but his point in it was a lot of it was. He said that the values, whatever they came in at, he was fine with them because they're actually worth a lot more. And I think his view is. On appraisals, I don't even know if it's his view. It's what he's saying is that somebody may pay $1.5 billion for Mar-a-Lago. So that's what it's worth. Like, somebody could pay $4 billion for the Seven Springs, the estate out in Westchester. So then it's worth that. That was sort of his through line on appraisals. It's not like two people would come to an agreement, or you'd have an appraiser and you'd put in comparables and you'd actually try and come to a value based on.
But he has applied for loans, so if that doesn't work, if he's represented other values on financial documents, isn't that sort of at the heart of all of this?
Right, and there's values all over the map depending on which documents you look at. So I don't think it holds water, but that's sort of where we were going. But it was a little bit like throwing spaghetti at a wall. There was a million. I mean, I don't want to put more emphasis on one or even more weight on one.
Right.
It was just, he had the 10 things we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks, and all of them came up today in terms of, I relied on experts. The financials are worthless. Even if they were submitted, everything in there is amazing, so it doesn't matter. I mean, and there's more.
And will it work?
Well, just to be clear, essentially what Suzanne's saying is just to think of the 4 years of the Trump presidency and the incoming where you were trying to catch all of the things that you thought were lies. And the number of Washington Post Pinocchio was just astronomical. And that was sort of his strategy, which was to overwhelm you. So this, to me, was so much was coming at the state's lawyer that his job was to really keep this honed and focused. And I think by and large, he did a really good job. And I think, particularly in the afternoon, I think he got what he needed. And so, yes, was the former president sort of all over the place with 18 defenses, of which any logical person. But it's also, the defenses are essentially it's the equivalent of, I didn't kill him, but if I killed him, it was self-defense. It's just all of these inconsistencies. But at the end of the day, there were things that I think, in addition to helping with intent and helping with reliance, there were statements that were were, I think, going to be argued credibly as false. For instance, at some point, the former president said, everything that happened in the Trump organizations was legal, and I wouldn't have tolerated anything that was illegal. The Trump organizations have been convicted before a jury.
Crimes.
Alan Weisselberg has pleaded guilty. So he just had to ignore all that and just say that's all fake news. So I mean, I think there was a lot of stuff where he, because of this sort of undisciplined approach of I'm going to put everything out there, I think he has given Judge Engoron sort of a poo-poo platter of okay, I'm going to take this falsity and this falsity and this falsity.
$100 for everyone that can work poo-poo platter into. You
have to remember though, and I think this is a really important point because we can sit here and talk about everything that came up in court. He has a different audience. We're thinking about how the judge is processing this, and his audience today was just completely different. So it's like the judges.
He does seem to care about what happens. It's his business.
But that's already pretty much a foregone conclusion.
No, that's a good point.
He's got his is outside in the bleachers. He's talking to
someone up there.
To someone out there.
Yeah.
And then, we can all talk about sort of the merits of this case. And I don't want to not have that conversation.
Yeah, no, but they're having a different conversation.
Drew us away from that today because he has a very different audience.
Thank you so much for being there, for covering it. It's mind-bending. Is that a word? I think it is.
It was today.
Thank you very much.